comes down to a fight between you and me, then you are doomed to lose.
Are your cameras gone off? No.
Keep the red flag flying here.
Hello and welcome to Socialist Night Live. I am speaking from a disembodied position at the moment because my camera is... Oh, there we go, we're back. It's nice to see you all on a historic weekend, apparently, where the entire television cycle is dominated by anything but things like this. So I hope that this is going to encourage people to come along and view us, see what's going on, because we've got some really important topics. The first thing I'd like to do is introduce the panel. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go briefly around the Socialist think tank people, and then I'm going to introduce you to our guest Luke. So firstly, Laura, say hello.
Hello.
You can say who you are if you like.
I'm Laura. I am a co-founder of Socialist Think Tank, founder of the Women's Banner Group. Oh God, do I have to do this list? I'm going to leave it there.
No.
Really happy to be here. Incredibly tired today. Again, it's like my life is always preempted with, but I'm tired. But happy to be here. And hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Rochelle.
Hello everybody, so my name is Rochelle. I'm a teacher and part of Socialist Think Tank, and I'm also running for Durham County Council this year for Labour.
But not campaigning tonight, you see, because we're not allowed to campaign, because we're not allowed. And our special guest, Luke.
Hi, I'm Luke. I'm founder of GRT Socialists. It was Labour GRT, but we don't talk about what happened there. It does get a bit like that, what Laura said. It's like kind of Game of Thrones-esque, where you've got about 1 million titles and things that you're involved in. So it's just better off to leave it out, really. But that's me. I'm a Roma and Gypsy. So trying to be too racist in the comments. But it's fine. I'll deal with it, whatever comes. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
You're very welcome. And also, we've recently done an interview that'll be on our Origin series coming up next month. So this is it's always interesting when we do those because they're never time sensitive. We always try and talk in general and say, this isn't going to be going out this week. So but we've already got some people who are really pleased to see you on the show, Luke. So that's really good. Right. Now, we've just seen, I think, let's talk about Lauren's show, because a few of us have been watching Lauren's show on Origins tonight. And James is saying, don't worry about the comments. Our mods will be on top of it, so don't worry about that. We've just watched Lauren Conway. Laura, thoughts?
Oh, I absolutely loved it. It was really refreshing to watch it because she was just so honest. I think in the Labour Party, especially at the minute, you're really just not allowed to talk about anything or say the name of any other political party or what have you. So, just to go through our journey with her from from trying to convince our parents to vote for UKIP as the lesser of two evils because they wanted to vote BNP, to then starting a branch for the Green Party, having not even realised she'd accidentally joined. It was really funny. And so her experiences and everything, I just found the whole thing really lovely. I agreed with like so much of the stuff she said. We had some amazing comments. You know, people like Lauren, when we get people like that on the shows, they tend to really give people a bit of hope that, you know, it's not all lost. There are people like us. And I thought you raised some really good points on the fact that, it, you know, I think she highlighted the fact that it's okay not to know everything. You don't walk into a CLP meeting and know what a constituency is or what a point of order is and all of that. And the fact that she got sort of ridiculed for doing those things really, really irritated us, because I think it happened to most people, most women, definitely. And the fact that, you know, the movement could have lost somebody at that point because she just got totally disenfranchised by these people basically taking the piss out of her. And so she educated herself on what was happening, and it just goes to show the type of person she is, the type of person that, you know, socialists are. And we've got a wonderful woman now in the movement still, and it was really heartening to see and funny. I was really laughing my head off at it. I thought it was great.
Yeah, Rochelle, did you get to see it?
I did, yeah. I totally agree with what Laura was saying, and I think a lot of it was like so relatable. Like when she was talking, it was just from like a normal everyday person's perspective, and like they wanted to do better, and they found out loads of things along the way, and she found her way of doing things. I thought it was really good, and yeah, totally funny. Like I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, it was really funny, like being part of it. Like you can. It's difficult to tell because when I'm doing the interview, like I'm creased laughing on the other side, but on mute. So she's laughing at my reaction to like what the things she's saying, and she was laughing away and stuff. But I think every now and then it'd be funny to see my reaction to what people are saying, because I think that's probably the most I've laughed during one. Maybe Charlie Hardwick was also someone I really, really laughed at. Everyone's made me laugh a little bit every now and then, but yeah, it was such a good interview to do, and it does really go to show that what's like, you know, we do sometimes make things far too difficult for people to access. We're supposed to speak for working class people, and yet why do we make things so difficult for them to access? It's like, oh, you know, and I don't understand why we organise the way we do either, and all through the chair nonsense and you know, that really arcane thing where people are like, oh, sorry, oh, I'm not offending anyone, I'm not doing this wrong, and it's about protocol and stuff that people can't possibly know. Just have a chat. It's absolutely like the best way to do it. And Luke, you didn't say that yet, but we were talking beforehand about Marx, weren't we, and about like linen, and you read Marx, and there's a whole section on linen and coats. And it's like, if 20 yards of linen equals one coat, then you're like, okay, linen.
Some parts of me, I just think that it's designed to be inaccessible. It's almost like they don't want our voices at the table. They don't want people like us speaking up for ourselves and our families and our communities, because, you know, they've controlled the party for too long, really. Like we often find people, they talk about working class people, this caricature of what they think a working class person is, when actually who they're looking out for is Guardian columnists with maids. Like that genuinely seems to be the target demographic oftentimes. And like, I mean, my family would just be like, what the hell is going on at some of our party meetings? And yeah, like we've made this whole movement talking about like theory and all this stuff, and like doing, you know, CLP motions and things. Like it's not really relatable to a lot of people. We don't feel included, and yeah, it's just not very good, really. So yeah, we need to make things accessible. How are you going to win? They always talk about, yes, we need to win this working class. What is it, Workington Man or something? Or like they come up with all these weird slogans. It's like, well, that's pretty much everybody in the country for one. And they've made it so bad that this person wouldn't even feel comfortable coming to your CLP meeting and organising with you. So like, how's that winning you electoral? Like, yeah, it just confuses me.
And then the Guardian rock up and they're like, well, we found Workington Man and he's the owner of a moderate artisan pizzeria. And we spoke to a man who owns a small artisan pizzeria. A working class man of the people. And you're like, what are you doing, man? What are you doing?
He only has 30 employees. Like, he's small fish, you know what I mean? Like,
and some of them are working class. Okay, so we're going to get into the big topic tonight for us. And this is something that I think over the past year, I've certainly learned a lot about this. And as it was probably just maybe a little bit longer than a year. It was just at the beginning of lockdown that we had you along to a CLP meeting, didn't we, Luke? You were telling us about GRT issues. And like, it was so brilliant because I learned so much about Gypsy, Romani, Traveller people, and the fact that you aren't actually the same people anyway, and all sorts of different things, and learned about the history and why people are called Gypsies and so on. And it was such an enlightening thing, and I would recommend anyone to try and get Luke along to any form of meeting. It doesn't have to be a CLP meeting, because you're quite, probably a little bit disillusioned with the Labour Party at the moment, despite the fact, you've worked really closely with the Labour Party and within the Labour Party. Outline what's been going on recently, and, you can tell us as much or as little as you want, but there's been some controversy lately, hasn't there?
I mean, what hasn't been going on recently? We had a shadow minister handing out dodgy racist leaflets going, traveller incursions, this, unauthorised encampments, that. And it's kind of like, well, you didn't put on your leaflet that you're going to build the £2 million transit site that you've all got, the money sat in the bank for. I wonder whose responsibility that is. Oh, wait, it's the councillors who are handing out the leaflets, who are actually got the money in the bank to build this transit site, which would solve their unauthorised encampment issue, right? But they're still using us as a political football. I just thought that was very interesting. Like, you've got the power to solve the issue, but yet we're still the cheap, let's punch down at a minority community, for cheap votes. But yeah, we had that shadow minister for women and equalities doing that. Not fun at all. If you can't know about Gypsies and Travellers and our inequalities, then maybe it's a poor fit for the job, personally. But this isn't the first time. We had councillors in the Durham and Easington area and places like that going up for disciplinary panels with their councils for this kind of rhetoric against our community that they done. We had Toby Perkins last year with the leaflet that was racist, basically insinuating that we're all extorters and things like that, which is like, the predisposed to criminality and things like that is all just one big trope, really. And I can sort of pick that apart later, because if not, I could talk forever on it. But yeah, recently they just let us down again, and we were reasonable. The first time when Toby Perkins came along and did it, we were like, okay, not everybody knows about our issues, despite these people meant to have advisors and all sorts. So we let him off, really, and we had a chat with him and told him why he was wrong. We've got no further action on it from him, by the way. And then the same thing with the shadow minister handing out a problematic leaflet happens again. And now we're like, well, we don't really feel reasonable anymore. We feel angry, and now we want retribution. We want, payment by 1,000 cuts, basically. So, because our community is really angry. But that's what's been happening. And then these councillors who produced the leaflet, one of them in particular I have a real issue with, which is Councillor Tom Jennings of Warrington. And my issue with Councillor Tom Jennings, not only is he using our community as a political football whilst they've got money to solve the issue in the bank, which is a transit site in Warrington, this guy is charging the Labour movement to produce these racist leaflets. So he's not only benefiting electorally, he's benefiting economically, and squeezing our community's situation for his own profit. And I think that's disgraceful from anybody who even is a Labour councillor, let alone somebody who's going to run a business from it, from our suffering as a community. Just a bit disgraceful, really. But we've got no public apology from the Labour Party, like other groups have got, which is right. It's the right thing to do. Those other groups were right to get that apology and things like that. Not got that. We got this letter, sent behind closed doors, as if we were all going to go, oh, we got a letter. They acknowledge that we exist, and we're all going to run off into the sunset, hold hands and sing Kumbaya. But that's not what's happening now. We're really angry, and now we want action. We want the 3 councillors for, Orford suspended and expelled. We want Tom Jennings, another councillor in Warrington, suspended and expelled, and we're not going to stop until we get it. So that's it. That's what's happening with the Labour Party in a minute. If they won't, we'll just drag them publicly, whether that be with memes or just calling them out directly. We'll do whatever it takes.
So the interesting thing for me here is, so you write a letter, who to? Like, you've insulted a community. Some people's brought it up. So, like, this is like saying, let's say during the civil rights movement, Dr. Martin Luther King, would you please accept our wholehearted apology and move on from this terrible event? And I know it's like not to that scale, but I think a lot of the scale of the racism and the misunderstanding of your community is probably underestimated. I think a lot of people describe it as the last acceptable form of racism, where even though we see racism of all different types, GRT racism is almost like it's almost accepted, and well, that's all right because it doesn't really count. We see that. Obviously, that is far from my opinion. So before someone clips that and says Mr. Daly is a racist,
yeah. I think the funny thing here is that we know it's not the last acceptable form of racism. It just passes a particular test, right, which is like the dinner table test, where you have a bunch of civil servants, what the Labour Party thinks it's like working class man is, right, treasury officials and stuff like that sit around a table and go and say the P word, pikey or whatever. That's what that's what they're talking about when they say the last acceptable form of racism. But as we've seen recently, against the black community and other communities, we've had a guy who's passed away now, God rest his soul, whatever. They're now marketing his sort of racist gaffes as gaffes. They're marketing his racism as gaffes and sort of blunders. And it's like, no, this is proper racism. Why are journalists, making this acceptable? Also, when people say about, it's probably not to that extent, when they're talking about racism towards our community, well, now we're at the extent where the government is trying to make families' existence illegal and potentially have their kids taken from them. I mean, that's a pretty big extent, in my opinion, like in terms of racism. I mean, when they say it's not, it's not quite as bad. Well, we're talking about mothers losing their children because of who they are and the way they live their lives and how poor and deprived they are. I think that's pretty racist, to be honest with you. So, when we talk about, it's not that big a deal, you kind of look white. So, what is the problem with this sort of racism? It's like, well, racism isn't about your skin, isn't necessarily about skin color and everything else. It's about what racists perceive you to be. And they perceive us to be a different race from white British people. And that's why, they talk about us in such a way, call us the P word, dirty Jippo, things like that. Obviously, don't say this like in your own life. If you see that, call it out. But like I say, all these things pass the dinner table test. So when people are saying the last acceptable form of racism, they don't mean literally no other form of racism's like accepted in our society by the ruling class. They just mean that amongst civilized what they consider civilized company, people can say it and nobody even blink an eyelid. That's what they mean by it. And I know what you mean, Paul, and by it. And obviously you don't mean any harm or anything. But yeah, this bill that they're coming out, this is a pogroms bill. Like they are basically outlawing the existence of a community, the way we've lived our lives for hundreds of years, and they're going to put us on a mass scale in prisons and take what little we have. Like, when have we seen this historically in society? We've only seen this in society historically when societies have taken a really horrible path to authoritarianism. And like I always said, like, we were screaming about this for months and months, and the Labour Party picked it up at the last minute and was like, oh, it actually affects normal people, like other people now. Now we care. But, we've always been used as a Trojan horse to take other people's rights away. When they come for our rights, even if you hate us as a community, you have to understand that when they're taking our rights away, you are losing some of your rights. They are making it more acceptable to remove your rights as well. So that's what I'd say to people. But it's just awful in this country. Like, even crimes that our community, like people from our community, haven't even committed, will get blamed for. And people like me will get held to account for like the crimes of individuals. And it's like, well, I don't hold you to account for people going to Wetherspoons and battering each other on a Friday night. I'm not going to say no white British people allowed in Wetherspoons on a Friday because, we had a fight here, 2 years ago or whatever. But they'll happily do it to our community. And like a police officer will get murdered or something, and it's really awful. Don't get me wrong. It's like that sort of thing's awful. I don't wish that upon anybody. I really don't. But when somebody from our community's done that, everybody from our community has to shoulder that burden. Our kids will get bullied in the local schools. Our trailers are often set on fire. We have people setting off fireworks. I'm sorry to like bring the night down, but it's like we'll get attacked and our kids will experience very real hardship and bullying on the back of that. And it's like, well, I don't expect ordinary white British people to be able to control all other white British people. So why do you think that people like me can control everybody from my community? It just doesn't really make sense. Like, it's like that guy who killed a police officer in the Northeast. It'd be like me coming to your CLP meeting and blaming everybody in the North. It's just not right, is it? So that's it, really. It's a horrible example, but that's it.
I think it's absolute madness. Like, you kind of just blanket everybody and blame everybody for one person's actions. Like, what do you hope to achieve? Like, when Luke was talking about, say, I hold my hands up and say I don't know a lot about Gypsy, Roma and Travellers or the societies or anything like that. So I've selfishly come on here to learn and listen. But I would definitely say that to tar everybody with the same brush, like, where does that leave you? Where are you going to go from there? Like, what's the next step? Like when you talk about like strategies and procedures, and you would maybe say like, right, this person stole something, he's going to jail. And then where do you go from there? So you're gonna put all of these people in prison, and then what? Like, when do they get out? How do you sentence them? Like, what is the plan? Because that doesn't sound like a plan. It just sounds like they're grasping at straws.
Laura, I think you were at the talk that we had in our meeting with Luke. Did you feel like you learned a lot? Because Rochelle's saying she's here to learn, and I think I'm going to get to this in a little while, because I think one of the key things that I think GRT Socialists do incredibly well is they are anti-racist in the fact that they do not condemn someone forever. Like, they do not do the act to which, like, so when someone is being awful to a community, like that, they say, well, actually, if we can't learn, if we can't improve, then there's no point in anti-racism. What are your thoughts around this, Laura?
Well, first of all, I wasn't actually at that meeting. I think I might have had COVID at the time. I don't think I was very well. I don't think I went. And I remember you coming off the call and you were just buzzing. You were like, that was amazing. Luke is so good. And I was gutted I missed it. So like Rochelle, I'm here to learn as well, really. And I think, I think we sort of say on this show quite a lot, actually, that you've got to give people the opportunity for reform, and you've got to give the people the opportunity to learn, and people have to be allowed to make mistakes. You can't be, a 13-year-old lad messing around with his mates, saying something really racist, and that's you as a racist for the rest of your life. You just can't do that. It's just not how humans are, you would hope that, you know, he'd have a good talking to and move on from that and become a more rounded, educated person. That said, a lot of these instances that Luke has brought up, for instance, the leaflet, those people should know better, especially the lady who is a shadow equalities officer, who then said, I don't know what an insurgent is, who was then photographed in her army uniform. It's just like layer upon layer of lies, just trying to get out of it rather than holding their hands up and going, this was a mistake and we're really sorry. You know, that's something, that's a start. But that's not a case of us saying, oh, well, we should maybe just teach them. No, these people were in a situation where they should have already known this. Elected officials, and the Labour Party, who claims to be the biggest anti-racist party and are doing everything they can and take all this racism really seriously. Clearly that's not the case, because I haven't seen the uproar from people within the Labour Party at all on this. And yet, if you go back just like a couple of years, the anti-Semitism issue we had was rife, you know, it was, and people were angry and furious and demanded things to be done. Whereas this just say, it'll pass, it's fine. So yeah, I agree that people need the opportunity to learn. I also agree that people need to just come on, have a brain. If you're going to have that job, then do it properly and mean it. And if you're not going to mean it, if you have these opinions, then you can't claim to be anti-racist. Simple as that.
I think truthfully for me is that if you're going to do one of these jobs, read the reports that charities and things like that are putting out, like the Runnymede Trust, for example. You know, all of these sort of educational, you know, based charities and charities that work on inequality will tell you that you can see the stats for themselves. We're listed as a group with the worst educational rates, one of the worst sort of outcomes in the criminal justice system. It doesn't take a lot to get somebody who works in your office to go, can you get me a list from like all of these organizations that are great on racism and things, and structural racism? Get the list of them and I'll read it. But they're clearly not reading these reports. I don't know what the point is in a fantastic organization like the Runnymede Trust putting out all this stuff if these people aren't going to read it. And secondly, I want to come back on the point, like, you know, about like educating people and re-educating people, right? Is that, look, we live in a racist society that's structurally racist. The people that run the society is racist, right? The newspapers are racist. Ordinary people, it's not to be patronizing to say ordinary people don't know better. It's not. It's that every day of their lives, they're bombarded with racist news. And for two, right, if I say, oh, you know, you're cancelled now forever, is that we wouldn't have any friends. We wouldn't have any allies or any friends or anything because we're that hated as a community and we're that misunderstood. So it's like, I wish I had the choice to cancel people. I don't have that choice. We can't cancel people because it's not physically possible to gain enough momentum to change things by doing that. And also, like, I believe in like proper like rehabilitating people and things. I don't believe in this idea, you know, you lock people up and throw away the key and all that crap. It's not me. It's not me. It doesn't help the victims, right? I said this in the Labour Party meetings that I do, right? Me cancelling somebody for being racist against my community, it's not going to make me any, you know, more safe on the streets. It's not going to make the families in their constituency more safe. It's not going to stop them getting attacked. What is going to stop them getting attacked and things like that is re-educating these people. If I can re-educate these people and they'd be less racist, it means that they're less likely to go and attack somebody. It means that I'm leaving that meeting, whether they're Labour Party or not. It just means that I don't have to deal with these people in my workplace and things like that and be called a dirty P word and all that, which is awful because, like, you know, it just hurts. Like when you're trying to get on with jobs and things like that, and you're trying to do the best that you can do, and you know, like some of you guys are teachers and that, and it's like you know, the way we're bullied out of schools and the way we're treated by a lot of teachers out there and like educational institutions, we're just thrown on the dustbin of society. Like they'll put us all on one table and they'll be like, oh, they don't want to learn anyway or whatever, and they'll give us colouring in pencils and things like that. They won't teach us what we need to learn. They'll put a lot of our kids have like, you know, neurodivergent and things like that. So like ADHD, dyspraxic, a lot of other things, like even autism and things like that, right? And then they'll use carceral punishments for children in a school setting. Like kids shouldn't have to face a form of prison at school where they're put in isolation for hours a day, or they forgot to sign their like homework diary and things like that. Like my mum and parents couldn't do that when I was growing up. We didn't have that chance. We were working dusk till dawn, running their own businesses and things like that, trying to make us survive. Like they don't have time for all this. You must do things this way and stuff. We just can't do that. It's not possible for a lot of us, and a lot of us have to help out our family businesses and things like that to make ends meet, really. But yeah, we've really got to talk about. It's not just sort of this idea of a racist that people in their head. They have a really horrible caricature of a racist. And it's a lot of working class town, like towns with a lot of, I shouldn't say working class towns, because you know there's people from all walks of life in every town, but this idea of a town that suffers from deprivation, all the racists being like skinheads and things like that. And it's like, no. The racists that we experience day to day, and a lot of the most problematic racism comes from teachers, comes from civil servants, lawyers, judges, police officers, nurses, midwives, doctors, people that society gives this sort of professional halo to. That, you know, that butter wouldn't melt in their mouth type thing. And it's like, oh, they couldn't do anything wrong. Nurses must know better. And it's like, no, there's a real problem with nurses who are racist. So that's what I want people to know. And we need to challenge these people. It's not just people who are uneducated and things like that. These are people from the top of society. Boris Johnson is an Oxford educated man, right, who wrote a book called like something ridiculous with all the racist caricatures of every community under the sun, including ours, and anti-Semitic stuff as well, by the way. So, yeah, it's not like this idea that it's just a working class men and women and non-binary and everybody else. It's not just those people that are doing it. It's people with the real power in society, like these councillors. But yeah, I'll give people the benefit of the doubt, and I'll try and show them a better way. Because when you start talking through what's the cause of unauthorised encampments, what are the cause of, you know, a form of homelessness, which the government are trying to outlaw now, I can tell you all of that in very short amount of time. I can tell you the solutions, but people don't want people like me in politics. They don't want people like me talking to anybody because they don't care. What it is that they're running off with all the money and the power, and they're pitting communities like mine against other communities and vice versa. And they're the ones with all the power. They're not going to stand up and go, oh, actually, it was me that done all this bad stuff, because they can't do that, because obviously we wouldn't vote the bastards in, would we? Do you know what I mean? So, yeah, that's the issue, is that, you know, we're all pitted against each other, and we need to understand each other's communities more. Like I say, I'll finish on this, right? But unauthorised encampments are caused by a failure of local government and the government to provide adequate provision for our community. You know, we talk about the housing crisis, but they don't want to talk about the housing crisis for us. They talk about, you know, bins being cut back to once every 2 weeks, but they don't think about how that's affecting us. They don't talk about how councils don't provide us bins and things like that. And they'll say things like, oh, yeah, you know, but your community doesn't pay council tax. Yeah, but neither do the poorest people in the country. And they still get their bins emptied by the council. So it is a clear sort of racist aspect to it. And they'll talk about, you know, why should we allow people to stay on public land and things like this, and private land and all sorts without planning permission and stuff. And it's like, but they already allow ordinary people to do that because they have the caravan club where people can do that for 28 days of the year. But for our community, no, that's not allowed, even though we've been doing this for 500 years. That's the truth of it. So what's more racist than that? And they'll be like, yeah, you know, you know, just live the way that the way that we live, which is like really assimilatory and like racist. Like, it is actually forced, like racism and forced settlement. And then they'll go for they'll go glamping, glamorous camping, or whatever the hell it's called, and they'll go and stay in literal gypsy wagons. So we're not allowed to live our own way of life, but these people can. How does that work? That makes sense.
It
I've
must.
never thought about it like that. Really.
Yeah, no, it's all right, Rochelle. I was just gonna say it must boil your piss. It's ludicrous, isn't it? It's must do. What a ridiculous thing! Like, oh God, I don't want to see these unauthorized campers, and let's go off glamping. Yeah, really, really good comments. If you think this message is worth getting out there, don't forget to share this. Don't forget to like it. Don't forget to write loads of comments, because the comments that are coming in, really high quality, but we need questions coming in. We do have some questions coming in, which is really nice, but do comment, because this part of the show is all about you. So this show would be nothing without the people who are watching it and the people who are contributing. And we are learning as we go. One of the things as well I want to comment on is, one of the most important things is in anti-racism as well. I think the idea that you can be racist yourself without knowing it helps you understand that, like, you know, when someone else has been racist, it might just be because they don't know. And I think there's this liberal attitude where people are like, I couldn't possibly be a racist because I'm already perfect. I know that I will learn things about myself in the future and think, oh God, did I used to think that? That's awful, you know. And these aren't. It's not on purpose. It doesn't make you an awful person. But what it does do is, like, if you're willing to learn, then that's fine. If you think that you're the finished article, firstly, you're wrong. Secondly, you know, you're never going to improve, are you? So I've got some really good questions coming in. I've got Jane Strange saying, where was it? I need to go back. Jane Strange. No, there was definitely a question there. Speak amongst yourselves. I will find a question. Any comments on that for now?
And also, like, tell people that, you know, if you think there's something controversial you want to say, obviously don't do it in bad don't do it with bad intentions. But if there's a comment that's really bothering you about my community or whatever, ask it. This is the time. I'm saying, come at me with these comments and I'll tackle them for you. And, you know, I'm not going to judge you or cancel you. It's, you know, anti-racism it's a doing word. It's not like a noun. It's actually an active process where you go out there in communities and you do the work of anti-racism and you could do the work of tackling racism. It's not, and a lot of these people that are like liberals and whatever, they'll sit there and say that they're not racist and then say the most horrendous thing. And they go, oh, yeah, because I'm Oxford educated, I'm actually okay. And it's like, no, you're the problem here, because the ordinary people you think are racist don't have any power in this country. And therefore, they do matter to me, obviously, because everybody matters to me. But they don't have the power to do things. Like, it's these liberals that are like, oh yeah, I've been to university, I must be, you know, an anti-racist. It's like, no, you don't know what you're talking about. You know, you really need to. You're the ones that need to listen the most, because you're the ones that are going to go to Westminster and enact all these horrible policies. So and go and work for the Home Office, deporting people, you know, back to countries that they've never lived in, by the way, and doing all this horrendous stuff. So you're the problem. That's what I want to say to all these people. And also they'll be like, yeah, you know, they'll say all these awful things, and they just think they're above it, and nobody's above it. Look, I freely admit, I wouldn't say that I'm racist or anything like that, but what I would say is that I will freely admit that I'm learning. I'm still in an active process of learning about, you know, a lot of LGBT issues, a lot of you know, stuff on sex work and stuff. I'm still learning about this stuff, but and so it's an active process, but you're not born perfect, because nobody is. And we've got to change that sort of mentality. And the only people that this benefits, this mentality of, you know, if you said anything once, you should be cancelled for life. The only people that benefits is actually middle-class white people. That's actually, because that's the only other people that come out the other side, and people go, they're the only people that they allow it to drop, basically. They'll cancel working class, like white people, but you know, it's actually middle-class liberals who still think they're anti-racist when they're saying awful stuff. They're the people that pass the filter, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple of comments I want to highlight. Ray said, gay people could have cancelled Arthur Scargill before 1984. What good would that have done? Now, for those of you who are fans of the channel or fans of any sort of modern culture whatsoever, the film Pride is based on lesbian and gay support the minors, of which Ray was a founder member. Now, yeah, what good would that have done to have said, actually, you know, you've said things in the past about us you can't learn. And that film, actually, to me, I know that film was... and we talked about it in our interview. It was a slightly de-socialized, but they took the word socialism out of that, but it still had those themes and it still had those feelings, and it was about learning, wasn't it? It was about a community coming together and learning. Where would we have been without that? And I know, like, Rochelle, I'm going to come to you at this point because you haven't said anything in a little while, and I know you're a big fan of that film and those issues. So where would we have been if we'd have just said, right, okay, actually, you have said something bad about us once, and therefore you shall stay cancelled for the rest of your life? Rochelle?
Was that to me or to? Oh, sorry. I
Oh,
thought
that
you
was
were
to
asking.
you, Rochelle. That was to you.
Sorry.
I thought I'd said your name, but I may not have done.
No, it's all right.
I'm on the home brew, you see. We'll see where that ends up.
I think that if you were going to do that, because the way my brain works, I always relate it back to school. I know that sounds ridiculous, but I always think about how something like that would affect the kids, because I always try and think, like, because I put a curriculum together for the kids, like social well-being, like we have to teach British values, we have to teach all these different things, and we have to get it in the curriculum. Now, one of the things we don't actually teach, or I don't teach, or it's not written anywhere in my school, is when we talk about racism, we don't talk about the GRT issues that you're talking about now. Like, and I don't think that I've ever heard them talked about in a school that I've worked in or been in. So, like, when we're talking about education, I think that that's definitely a step forward. Like, I know for a fine fact that I could go away and write a lesson, or maybe book somebody in to come and talk to the kids about it and maybe educate them that way on, because we do have children come to our school who are travellers, and you know, and maybe they do feel you know, a lot of those things that you're talking about, and I don't think that I've ever looked at it that way before, or you know, thought like that a lot of it needs tackling in that sort of sense. And I think that if that kid was at school and they were like going to be cancelled, you know, because of who they were, like, I think that's terrible. I think it's really bad.
As a teacher, do you like? In a way, we've probably done quite a good thing in schools, because I've taught like GRT kids in the past, and I don't know whether it's my personal approach or whatsoever. I haven't known that those people have GRT background. I've kind of said at one point, when have you like, oh yeah, why were you away for that period of time? And they were like, oh, I was travelling, and I've gone, oh right, that's the first time I've known. So that, in a way, that's a really inclusive thing, and the idea that I wouldn't possibly know that. But then I suppose in a way as well, me not knowing that is an issue, because, you know, like, I haven't said, oh, actually, you might have missed this, you might have missed this, because in secondary schools especially, you might not teach a child for you might not have taught them until year 9, and you don't know what they've missed. And I think that can be a big thing. And it feeds into Ray's asking, how do we think better education could be accessed by children in nomadic communities? How is that? And I suppose that what he's doing there is he's differentiating between people who are of GRT heritage and people who actually travel. I guess so. Any thoughts on that one, Luke?
Yeah, that's it. I mean, he's onto something, really. He is really onto something. The thing is, right, plenty of us live in houses now. That's the thing. Nearly 85% of us now are, you know, either in houses or on permanent sites. So that's one thing to think about. Now, the nomadic parts of our community are some of the most deprived, and, you know, some of them have really, really difficult lives, and not because of the way they make it for themselves, which is, you know, what the state will have you believe, but they just... You know, it's really difficult. If people can determine your background as a gypsy or a traveller, you're in big trouble. Like, getting employment's really difficult. People will literally ask you on the doorstep if you're going for a job or whatever. They'll be like, you know, are you a P word, or are you a dirty Gyppo or whatever. They will say that, and so we're economically excluded and all that, so that makes it hard. But in order talking about education for nomadic children, one of the really funny well, it's not funny, it's sickening really, examples that I use is about this pandemic. They keep on telling us, it wasn't possible to get resources to educate children at home. It wasn't widely accessible for disabled children, by the way, to get access to stuff at home if they're feeling ill or whatever. It wasn't possible to do all these things. All of a sudden, the pandemic's hit, and all of a sudden, wow, it's all possible. So what you're telling us is that this has been possible for ages, but now you're all affected. Now you're going to do something about it. It's just clear sort of they value our children a lot less, and they value our lives a lot less. But you're onto something, right? Like I say, they cut loads of the programs where they used to have educational liaison officers with Gypsy and Traveller families, where they'd send them out to the site, make sure they're reading or whatever needs to be done. And they ask the families, do you need help? What do you need to make your kid do better in education and things like that? And it's a simple thing to ask, but nobody ever thinks of it because, we're not worth asking, basically. But that's what we could do, provide resources like that, fund properly, fund schools properly, and fund all these educational services that communities like ours need. Like our kids, and even to work for themselves or whatever, still need to be able to read and write. They still need to know, how to read and fill out a tax return or whatever. How to liaise with the council and things like that. So yeah, that's the way you do it. And look, I've taught kids from my community who are still nomadic. A lot of my family are still nomadic, so a lot of my relatives. But you can teach a kid through WhatsApp, believe it or not. If you're a good enough teacher, and genuinely, I'm not just saying this, I've not had any training to be a teacher. I'm not saying I could do it for a class of 30 or whatever. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that there are ways of doing it, and our community does function slightly differently, but it's not difficult to ask somebody, how do you think your kid would learn better? How can we make school a more inclusive place for you? How can we make sure that your kids don't feel alienated and they're not called all these horrible racist things? And when a leaflet like what happened in Warrington goes out, how do we make sure kids in the schools aren't being racist towards those kids once those leaflets drop? Because on the back of those leaflets, it's not just people who are still nomadic that get the flack for it. It's all of us that get the end sort of horrific stuff happening. So yeah, and I think teachers are very brutal with, they go about negotiating with families the completely wrong way. You must do this and you must do that. And it's not a two-way discussion about these people's children. And that puts families like, oh, my family would tell you to, do one. I can tell you that for a fact. So, if you're going to dictate to them, just come to them and obviously teachers know how to educate kids. I'm not saying that our families know better. I'm just saying it has to be a dialogue. It has to be a two-sided thing. How can we make education more inclusive? How can, we get your kids into school more often or whatever? So yeah, it's a two-way street really, but that's how you make it better for nomadic kids. And yes, some of our families do have cultural values about sex education. Look, I think sex education is important. I really do. And I think it's seriously important. But the way you go about those things with those families is go, I don't want let's say a family comes to you and go, I don't want my kids in those sex education lessons and all this stuff. What you need to do is go to that family and be like, okay, well, what would you be happy with them doing on this? Because this is still a really important thing of life. Don't dictate to them. Just say, this is still a really important thing for these kids to know, because we don't want your kids, getting to an age where they don't understand this stuff. Just go, what if we take those kids separately and, show them the sex education video or whatever? Would that be more acceptable to you if we separate boys and girls and things like that, or whatever it is? Like I say, it's a dialogue. We are operating, our community in a lot of ways is very sort of behind the times. And we sort of operate at a time 50 years behind, modern society. And you do have to account for that. You can't just go fit in or piss off. Yeah, that's not the way you do it, right? But yeah. Thanks.
Can I ask you a question? So I actually plan our sex education curriculum for the school, right? and I know what statutory and what the government says we have to do and all that kind of stuff. So I don't know if this is a cheeky question or not. So what is it about the sex education at school that you might not like about it? Is it the way that it's taught? Is it the content? Is it the fact that boys and girls are taught together? You know, like that type of thing. Like how could, if I wanted to change the way that I did it, what would be your suggestions?
I mean, my suggestion would be, really is, I mean, if you know what statutory and all that sort of stuff, right? Having a negotiation with a family is better than them being like, okay, well, you know, screw the school, I'm pulling the kids out. You know what I mean? Having a negotiation there is a lot better than you losing those kids and them not getting educated. So that's my approach to it. Whether it's statutory or anything else, I don't care about that. What I care about is these kids getting educated and things. But what I would say is, it's not just so culturally, we're very sort of, I'm very open and things like that. Like I'm progressive and, but this is things I've learned. But a lot in our community are very sort of, sex can be like a taboo subject. And it could be an uncomfortable subject. Like I wouldn't have this discussion with my sisters. That would be culturally inappropriate. Like if I talked to all the women in my family or whatever, like a lot of families, it would be really inappropriate for, you know, people to talk about this subject. And I like, in a way, I sympathize with the curriculum in terms of like, I want everybody to know this stuff. But at the same time, like culturally for hundreds of years, we've just lived in a sort of different bubble to everybody else. And it's just seen as really highly inappropriate. Like people often don't have, it's kind of Puritan in a sense, where it's like, oh yeah, people don't have sex till marriage or whatever. In a lot of communities, they're brought up like that, and I guess it's the same for a lot of religious communities as well. So that's where it is. It's kind of a taboo subject. So, you know, men and women historically haven't been. It's not really seen as okay talking about those sorts of things, or even swearing around the women in my family would be very frowned upon, like in a lot of families, not mine so much now. We've kind of moved with the times a little bit more, but in a lot of places saying like the C word or whatever, apart from in a very brutal argument, because in our families, in our communities, arguments, we get them out and we get them out hard, and then we all shake hands and everybody forgets about it, or there's a grudge that lasts 50 years. But so we're very straightforward and forthright in terms of like the way we talk and things like that. But yeah, it's just seen as culturally taboo. That's it really. But you know, I wouldn't force it. Like I wouldn't say to you, go out to these families and ask them whether they'll put them in. Just do it. And then if the families have a problem with it, then go to the stage where you're going to negotiate with them and see what can make it a bit more comfortable, or a bit more like, you know, a bit more okay with them, I guess. So that's what I would suggest personally, from my experience of my own family, and, you know, not just Gypsy families like mine, but Irish Traveller families and things. That's what I would say on that, really. I know it sounds simple, but genuinely make it a two-way thing. Don't make it a dictatory thing where the government says you have to do that, because we will just say, like, piss off, basically. Because, yeah, we value our children, by the way, above, like, I know everybody does, right? Everybody says it and things like that. But like, often families want to keep their children in like a bubble. They want to keep them just being children, I guess. I don't really know how to explain it, but I'm not like that anymore personally, but I'm just trying to explain how it is really.
Thank you so much for this. I'm going to come to the comments for a little while. There's been some ones that have really made me chuckle, to be honest, in a very friendly way, because we're getting that time of night where maybe people have had a couple of beers. I know I have, but there are some really serious things in there as well. But I'll do the light-hearted ones, and then we'll go back into the serious stuff. So some very attractive men, great listen, from Henry Jacobs. Henry seems to be a big fan of particularly you, Luke. He likes you with the glasses, and yeah. I like him. The revolution needs a face like that. I don't know if you know Henry, or if this is just you've just gained yourself a super fan. But either way.
Look, I don't know Henry, but he's more than welcome. Look, there's enough of me to go around, I guess. I get. Look, I think I have like this odd. I mean, I wish I didn't have glasses, because I pull off this sort of Austin Powers aesthetic, and it's really not good. I need a haircut to get rid of that. You know what I mean? So I don't know if the Austin Powers look is doing it for Henry, but yeah, there we go. I guess. Thanks for the comments, Henry. Appreciate it. I don't take flattery well, I guess. I kind of just, I get embarrassed, I guess.
It's okay, because a lot of people criticise my hair, particularly when it's wet. I had a nightmare the other day on the Manx podcast when we had the Manx people, and people were just having a go at my hair, like, what's going on with your hair? Why have you washed your hair in a chip pan and things like that? It was just wet. I have a busy life. Sometimes I have to have a shower just before the show. Give us a break. Like tonight as well. I've done the same thing again. But some more serious ones. Really really nice to see one of my colleagues, actually, Richard Val, really good guy, saying in Durham he's had training on these issues, and a real positive thing there. Ray's asking, like, and you wouldn't necessarily know this, but he's wondering what it's like as a gay GRT person. Is it acknowledged at all? Is that
I can answer this, because my cousin is very prominent on Twitter, and he's called Mikey Walsh, and he's an author of a book called Gypsy Boy. Apparently it's a very good book, but obviously I don't want to read it because it's about my own sort of family, like not close family, but well, they are kind of close. They are my cousins, basically. But yeah, he's a gay gypsy man. Like I say, look, in a lot of respects, we are 50 years behind the time. I'm not going to kind of sugarcoat it for you. He's had to go through a lot of struggle and a lot of issues, but I do think personally it is getting better. I'm a straight man, but it's not for me to sort of talk over gay gypsy men and traveller men like Mikey, because he can definitely talk for himself. I can tell, and he's really great. He's really got so yeah, follow Mikey on Twitter. He's great. He wrote that book Gypsy Boy, and that'll tell you all about the struggles, being a gay gypsy man. Like I say, we're often behind the times, but I do think families are getting more accepting now, a bit more accepting in terms of like, look, people, we want to accept gay people, trans people, and everybody for who they are in our community, because that's better than them being dead. Genuinely, it's better than us losing our youth, losing people from our community, and it's really hard. It's difficult. These sort of things, we already have a bad enough suicide rate as it is. Do we really want to make the lives of our youths and things like that even worse than they're already? Like, we already have it tough enough. So we are becoming more accepting, I think, with the times. Like, especially like my family. Like, if I was to come out or anything like that, I'm sure they'd be fine with it. But it is difficult. We are behind the times, and we do need to do a lot of sort of self-evaluating our situation and talking about suicides and how that's, how the atmosphere towards people who are different sexuality, or in Drag Race, for example, there's a person from our community who is really good on Drag Race, and we need to get those voices out there. We need to talk about these people because they're really good, and honestly, but we've always had, it's not like gay gypsy men is like a new concept, or even lesbian women from our community. It's not a new concept. It's always been there, but we've kind of always I guess in a terrible way shut it behind closed doors. But the rest of society did that. That's not a phenomenon that is just to our community. That's the whole. But we do need to have a bit of self-reflection and make sure that we've got the most positive, accepting environment out there, so everybody can be themselves. Like, we get enough judgment from outside our community. We don't need to impose shit on our own, basically. So that's what I would say. But yeah, like I say, my cousin's great, Mikey, and there's plenty of gay gypsy men voices. Traveller, I think it's Traveller Pride on Twitter. Follow them. They're pretty good, I think. And have speakers that, again, they'll talk about their own experiences and things. So yeah, I think it is getting better, but like I said, there's a lot more work to do. And like in the many communities, we do have our issues and we do need to solve them. But I don't think it's how it's quite portrayed anymore. I really don't. Like, you'll get the odd sort of like Tyson Fury basically came out, back in the day and said some quite homophobic stuff, which was awful. And I think he's apologized for it now, but that's not really that's not the point. But we do need self-reflection. We do need to improve the situation out there. I talk about it quite a lot, and follow those voices. But it wasn't, historically, it's been quite taboo. But like I say, we're 50 years, behind everybody else. We do just move at a slower pace, and we do mix within our own circles, and we have slightly different cultures. I think the issue is a lot of Western society sort of imposes its values on communities like ours without actually understanding communities like ours. And they'll talk about women and they'll talk about everything without having any sort of, like, Jess Phillips will come along and say all this awful stuff about our community when she doesn't actually know what she's talking about. That's the issue. This is the same person that will go and ring the police on, unauthorized encampments in her constituency. She doesn't go there and go, do you need water? Are your kids okay? Are they fed? Is everybody okay there? Do you need anything? She doesn't do that. She just rings the police and then posts it on Twitter to, incite hatred, basically. And these are the sort of people that are like, these feminist voices that aren't inclusive of Gypsy and Traveller women, aren't inclusive of our community. And they'll imply the same standards of your community to ours. And it's not a cookie cutter approach. Like, it's not just in this country, but all across the world, women are seen differently and in different lights by different cultures. Societies value them differently. And I actually think Western culture in general, I think it treats women awfully, really, in a lot of respects. It says that, bringing up children, you're sort of, it's like I say, you can get plenty of Gypsy and Traveller women to speak about this, and they're a lot better than I am in general at speaking. So get those voices on, get Chelsea and everybody else on, and they'll talk about it. But in talks, I've had sort of people come to me and go, we should stop Gypsy and Traveller women getting married at an early age and things like that. And it's like, okay, well, if they want to get educated, I agree with people getting educated and everything else. I don't have a problem with that. But don't enforce your values. What if those Gypsy and Traveller women want to get married at an early age? Have you ever thought about that? Have you ever thought about feminism's meant to be giving women more choices, not less choices, because you think your middle class feminisms represent? And it's a bit like how they treat sex workers in a way. Like, they get this like patronizing sort of approach to these communities of women. It's like, well, they can speak for themselves. Why don't you just listen to those women and listen to what they want? Don't impose your values on those people. And I don't have a problem with Gypsy and Travellers getting married at young ages. Like, there's plenty of marriages that have like, obviously legal. Like, we don't do underage. Like, as much as people like to believe in their head, we've got some weird community that do all this dodgy stuff. Getting married at 18 isn't necessarily a bad thing in all cases. I wouldn't personally do it, but it's not. You can't blanket say we should outlaw it just for the Gypsy and Traveller community. If you believe that Gypsy and Traveller women don't have the agency to make those choices at 18, well, then you shouldn't believe that about any other community. You shouldn't patronize women in our community and say that they can't make decisions for themselves. I think that's awful. So, yeah, like, don't judge, like, yeah, don't make statements about our community like that, about women and children and everything else, without applying it to your own communities first. So that's what I would say. Like, I genuinely had that in a CLP talk, and it made me feel awful, because I was like, if you ask my sisters, they're like, what if they wanted to do that? They'd just be like, well, why are they telling me that I'm not allowed to do this? But at the same time, we should make it more okay for people from our community, from both gender, all genders, and sexualities and everything else. We should make that more normal for people to go to university if they want to do that. It should be about choice. It shouldn't be about restricting choice because you think people from our community don't have the agency to make their own choices. I think that's just awful. But yeah, I know it's a bit of a complex subject, and it's very easy to trip up on it. So I have the best intentions with that, but like I say, my idea of what feminism is, as a man, and women can talk better for themselves, is that my idea is giving more choices to women, and making everything more acceptable for people to do that. That's just my approach. But yeah, I just don't think this sort of like liberal middle class imposing your values on people. I don't think that's very nice, to be honest.
Thanks for that, Luke. And really interesting, especially on the point of feminism. Now, we have had a comment on that one about we haven't heard much from the two ladies tonight. Well, the two women, I prefer to say. And there is a reason for that. I'm nominally the host. We're not really doing this like hugely hierarchical thing here. I'm sort of the host. Luke's the big guest on this topic. But we are very proud on Socialist Think Tank that we are probably the most, out of the socialist media channels, we are, I think, the two women will now take over and tell you, but I think we're probably the most female representation. We are tell us a little bit about what you think about Luke's ideas around feminism there, and you take it away. And also, if there are any questions that are coming up in the chat, which has been sort of my role at the moment, but if you want to bring up any questions in the chat whatsoever, please do.
Yeah, I think we're not probably, we're definitely the most gender balanced, I'd say, out of any of these sort of shows that are going on. For me, I've just been really listening to everything Luke's been saying. It's been a really good opportunity for me to learn. I find the whole stuff around the sex education really interesting, because I get that some parents aren't comfortable with that. That's absolutely fine. And I do like the idea of teachers approaching the families. I think it's really, really important that, the GRT community do take part in for sexual health more than anything else. It's certainly not like, this is how you do it. It's not like that. So, but it is interesting, because in some ways, I feel, from what I know of the GRT community, and I'll hold my hands up and say it is not a vast knowledge. I'm learning every day, but it feels like, sort of, in some ways, obviously every community is as diverse as the next one. You're not all the same, but it feels like in some ways you're really progressive. And just listening to you speak, Luke, it feels like the idea of community spirit and all of that is something that is sorely needed. I mean, we could really learn a lot from you guys, because our community spirit has just been absolutely demolished since, well, Thatcher, basically, and probably before, but that's the big standout moment where everything changed. But hand in hand with that, you've also got a long way to go. Like you said, you probably 50 years behind the times in terms of gay rights and things like that. So I'm finding it a really interesting juxtaposition of those two things. And I think essentially it does all just it boils down to everybody should just get along. And I know that is the most simplistic thing I could ever say, but if you just respect other people's opinions, as long as they're not hateful, and as long as people are willing to learn and we just speak to each other, that is how all areas of our society should be acting. And I think we're not given the opportunity to do that because of the people who are leading us, who, like you said, are probably the most racist people in our society, certainly the most selfish. And it's not just a race issue, it's a class issue as well, because all these rich people that all went to the same school all get the job of telling us what's best for us, and they don't have a clue. Even down to people who claim to be anti-racist and a voice for the people, like Jess Phillips. You're absolutely right. She should have been knocking on the door, just saying, right, you're here, what's going on? What do you need? Is everything all right? But no, we'll ring the police. It's absolutely disgusting. And it actually reminds me of, there's a lady here in Easington, Heather Wood. She's like a community activist. Everybody knows her. She's incredible. Her mum, I think there was a I don't know like when it was, but there was an encampment. The Travellers came and they set up shop in Easington somewhere, and all the community were like, oh, not happy about this, or what should we do? We'll all have to stay indoors. And Heather was like, not sure about that. And her mum, Myrtle, who was like quite old at the time, but she was really famous in the area, just walked down and no one saw her for like 3 hours because she was just going around all the caravans having cups of tea and talking to people. And she made them pies and stuff. And then more people started speaking to them and it became really normalized. And it was just wonderful. And I really like that story. And I wish more people were just like that. There's just too much nastiness in the world, and I realize I'm coming at this from a really simplistic point of view today, simply because I hold my hands up. I'm not educated enough on this subject at all, but I'm really intrigued by it and really interested by your community. I think it's wonderful, and I just wish people weren't knobheads. The end.
I think one of the funniest things about that is that, like, people don't realize that we're not monsters. Like, we're not these, like, we're not outside of your community. Like, they have this debate in Parliament. They're like, yeah, gypsies and travellers and our local communities. Like, no, we are part of your local communities. And also, right, if you look, nobody will ever starve, right? No matter how much it costs people to feed you or whatever it takes, or have a cup of tea or anything, you will go well fed around gypsies and travellers. Like, people think that we're monsters. Genuinely, if you came up with that approach, like that Heather Wood lady that you're talking about, woman, sorry, that you're talking about, if you go with that approach, like, the amount of times you'll be invited in for a cup of tea or whatever is probably really high. It just ask them what they want, and you'll get chatting, and you'll realize actually there's not that much difference in a lot of ways, and you can build a lot of sort of community ground. I just want to say on the previous, like, there's plenty of families, by the way, who have accepted, women going off to get educated, people who are gay, people who are lesbians, people who are drag queens, people who are everything under the sun. There's plenty of families that have done that. This idea that, we might be 50 years behind the time, but people still love their children. Like, we don't just go, go, we hate you now or whatever. That's not how it works. We still look out for people from our community, and like, there's a lot of solidarity, and also people don't realize there's actually three in GRT, right? There's three different communities. There's gypsies like me, there's travellers, Irish travellers. So I do have some Irish traveller ancestry, but that's a different thing, right? I'm pretty much fully Romany gypsy. That's it mainly. But Romany gypsies and Irish travellers are two different communities. Irish travellers are a Celtic community who speak a Celtic language. Our community is originally from India and speaks an Indian language. Like, that's the sort of difference you're talking about. Then there's Roma, who are in Central Europe and Eastern Europe. They have the same origins as us, Romany gypsies, and have similar language origins, but a lot of those people were forcibly settled in Eastern and Central Europe. They also experienced slavery in Romania until 1865. So that's pretty recently. We talk about slavery, but we don't talk about that. So there's three different communities in it, and we've sort of diverged from Roma a little bit in some ways. A lot of us have kept nomadic, but also a lot of us have sort of married into Irish travellers and vice versa. So that's why we tend to be like slightly paler looking, with more white passing, things like that. But yeah, there's so much diversity within those three communities. There could be books written on all three of those, but we've been lumped together like that BAME sort of thing, like, because we have similar needs and we experience similar prejudices, basically. But all, like, both gypsies and Irish travellers, we look out for people from our communities because there is a bit of solidarity there, because we all experience the same things in schools. And often in schools, you'll see groups of us sort of congregating together because, we feel safer that way. We feel like, if we all get killed in a racist attack, then the people will defend us. And generally that does happen. Like, there's a guy called, there was a person called Johnny Delaney, basically, who got killed and by some youths, and he got murdered, and they walked away from his body and said, like, it doesn't matter because he's just a dirty gypsy. And it's just awful, like we did. And people experience like literal petrol bombs coming into their sight, and people experience, there are some gypsy travellers out there who have had their kids inside trailers whilst they've been set on fire. That's the sort of violence that we're looking at here. People have had graffiti all up their trailers saying, all this racist Nazi graffiti and stuff. So we do look out for our own, and we are a bit scared of the outside world in terms of like we are a bit insular, but that's for a safety perspective. It's because we don't know who to trust because the police beat us up. We experience police brutality. So like the only people we can look out for is each other. That's all we've got in this world. Nobody else is going to do it. So yeah, we do have a little bit of solidarity. I guess that's where the solidarity that used to be there, that's all sort of been, trodden on to become an individualist society in like the Northeast and places like that, where historically they've had so much solidarity to look out for each other. Because they've had that collective experience, that's where solidarity comes from. And I guess our community still has that because we still experience those sort of awful attacks and things like that. But yeah, it's really great to speak to people that are willing to learn and stuff. And it's hard to do this talk in like an hour or 2 hours. It could go on forever, but just because there's so much. But don't get just me on. Get a different speaker from our communities who are gay, who are lesbians, who are all these different things, and they'll show you how diverse our community really is. So
Yeah,
I would sorry, Paul. I would quite like to work with you to try and put a lesson together for my school. I think that would be really good if you were willing to do something like that. Mint. And then I was going to bring, so when you asked about the comments, so I'd seen one earlier, but I can't find it now. I think it was Sarah who asked it. And the question was based around where we're talking about educating people, but it's all one side, and we're talking about the media having this like rhetoric. So what the question was based around, what do you think about the TV programs that they're putting out? And she listed loads, and it was like My Big Fat Gypsy Wedding, there was another one. I couldn't remember all of them, but it was a question around that, like how does it make you feel when they're putting those films out?
well, it's demoralizing because people like me and loads of others, by the way, historically as well, have done loads of work on educating people and things, and then these programs just put us behind like another 50 years, like on what I'm saying about, because these people will talk about sex education, all that stuff, that we need it in our community, but then they'll put on a program like Big Fat Gypsy Wedding, which has caused loads of children to be bullied, beaten up in schools. It's not representative of our community. Nobody had ever heard of a concept called grabbing, whether gypsies or Irish travellers. Nobody had ever heard of that, and then it's all of a sudden on this program we're like, who the hell are, like, what the hell's going on? And they'll show like videos of gypsy and traveller people who are underage drinking and things like that, and it's like, well, if I go to your communities, I can find loads of people underage drinking. Like, why are you presenting us in this light? And then they'll go, the truth about traveller crime. Well, I can tell you quite simply the truth about traveller crime, right? And that there is crime there, but it's like a lot of other minorities have lots of crime, and there's only one common denominator with minorities and crime, and the only common denominator, and it's also in the white British community, white working class people, poverty and deprivation. When you're socially excluded, economically excluded, you're bullied out of schools, you're called P word, this, that, you can't get jobs or whatever it is. Most of our community is self-employed. That's a quick fact. But and run their own family business, and that's how we do. Well, we were doing apprenticeships before it was cool. But anyway, what I was going to say is that this makes everything so much harder. Like the amount of, like, I'm university educated now and everything like that. I went through the whole thing, and my sisters didn't want to experience all that bullying and stuff, and wanted to leave school earlier and stuff because it was just harrowing. Like nobody has to, like, we're traumatized as a community. We are genuinely traumatized for our experience in schools, and it's not just from pupils, from teachers as well. And it's really difficult to listen to for teachers, I know, but it does happen like that. And when they say the truth about traveller crime, like I say, the only common denominator between all these minorities who suffer, extra poverty, extra deprivation, that's the only common denominator. The common denominator is how the British state treats us. It's not because we're inherently criminal. It's not because we're biologically predisposed to criminality, which is what Priti Patel went and said on the Board of Deputies, by the way, which is a disgrace in itself, but no shock there. We're just people. Like, at the end of the day, nobody's inherently a criminal. We're not culturally criminal, as they say. It's genuinely just because the way society treats us. Like, of course we're going to have more criminals in our community if you come along and criminalize our way of life. Like, it's pretty simple. If you make it from a civil to a criminal offense, there are going to be more criminals in our community, right? If you make it so people can't feed their kids, well, they are going to have to turn to other methods of feeding their kids. Like we all would, because at the end of the day, our kids being fed and watered comes before rich people, hoarding all the money, or supermarkets, or whoever it is. Like, I don't have a problem if a poor person can't afford to feed their kids or anything like that, and our society hasn't looked after that. I don't have a problem with them stealing. If that's what they have to do to feed their children and get baby formula and really horrific stuff that they shouldn't have to do in a 21st century democracy, the sixth richest country in the world, then so be it. That's all I say, is that the society that we live in should look out for people. And that's the way I approach it. And, so many people are in our prison system and things like that don't need to be in there. Economic crimes and things like that. You shouldn't be in prison. Have a society that provides the basics for people: a roof over your head, food in your belly, access to clean water. And our society has failed my community on this. There was people over the pandemic that didn't even have access to clean water because everybody had bought all the bottled water out of the supermarkets in panic buying and things. So yeah, that's what I'd say. It's just it really is just awful, the way they talk about us and like criminality and things. And they don't talk about the fact that we're like, people on unauthorized encampments are suffering a form of homelessness. We never used to be on unauthorized encampments because we had places like Gypsy Hill in London. We had the Black Patch in Birmingham. When they talk about Appleby Fair, which is more closer, in the north, we had all those stopping sites on the way to Appleby Fair, which has been going for hundreds of years. Do you know what I mean? So people could go there and do that without a problem. And like, when we first came to these islands, we provided a service to people, because people in like really rural communities didn't have access to skilled sort of metal workers and things like that. Like, it was a lot harder to come by. So we actually performed a really good economic function back then. Obviously times have moved on and we've been left behind again. But our historic way of life, if I want to choose to be nomadic tomorrow, I should be able to do that, because anybody else's way of life. We should all be able to live in a proper democracy. We should all be able to live together, understanding each other, working together. But they don't want that. They like unauthorized encampment. The Tories love it because it's another political football, a culture war that they can use to gain easy votes in places where you guys where you live. So yeah, that's why. And even, like I said, Labour politicians, they've got the money for a transit site, so they're providing these people with a place to live, but they haven't built it because they don't care. These councillors in Warrington don't care about our community, don't care about our kids. And when we talk about like Jess Phillips talking about feminism, well, where was her
Don't
care?
get me started on that.
But where was the care for the women from our community who were on the track, or who were on the unauthorised encampment that she rang the police on? Where they were then dragged along and brutalised by the police, most likely. That's not that. How is that looking out for women from our community? That's all I'd say on that. But yeah.
Back to what you were saying about crime there. I suppose that a lot of communities in poverty have that stigma of crime attached to them. But it's interesting, like, sort of a lot of the crimes that like poverty-stricken communities or working-class communities or Gypsy, Roma and Traveller communities, it's like, say, if someone does drugs, then therefore that could be a prison offence. Whereas if you're rich and you do drugs, that's just, it's just us having a little bit of fun, a little bit of nose candy or whatever. And then the same goes for the crimes that they do. They can, like the banking sector can do really criminal acts that destroys the world. And that's not really a crime, because, it was just making sure that they got the best possible deal for themselves, whether they're tax avoiding or anything like that. So, like, crime isn't just one sector. It isn't just poor people who do crime, but it seems to be that the rich people get a free pass on it. And also, like, the idea of when they're burning £50 notes in homeless people's faces, or smashing up restaurants. That's just hijinks, isn't it? You know, with the Bullingdon Club and stuff. And there's this whole idea that rich people don't do crimes, but it's just simply they can get away with it.
Poverty is the crime.
Hmm.
That is the crime. It's not about whether you've done drugs. It's not about whether you've stolen stuff. It's not about whether you've done this, that, and the other. Being poor is the crime. That is it. There is no other crime. All of these things rich people can get away with. Legislation is only applying to poor people right now. Rich people get best lawyers, everything like that. We don't have legal aid anymore properly. So people from working class families and things don't have access to proper justice anymore. So literally poverty is the only crime out there pretty much, apart from like really terrible like sexual offences and like murders, which happens in all sort of strata of society. Well, I mean, you could argue at the top it's probably worse in a lot of those respects. Historically, if we look at the BBC, but let's not get into that. But what I'm saying is that poverty is the crime for most things. The fact that people don't have a place to live, you're criminalised if you're homeless, you're criminalised if you're a drug addict or anything like that. Not can we provide services to you, not can we provide you a public health approach that we can actually provide you a way that's comfortable, give you somewhere to live and things like that to get you off of drugs. They don't want to do that. It doesn't pay. It doesn't pay Serco and G4S to run all the prisons, the private prisons that we have in this country. Like I said, poverty is the crime, and the more people they can arrest, the more money they can generate. And the more people like us, it's not just about unauthorized encampments who are the political football. It's not just about Black Lives Matter who are the political football. It's all of us. And the more we start talking to each other as communities, the more we realize they're treating us all the bloody same for different reasons. Don't get me wrong, or some are more racist than others or whatever it is. But the truth is that whilst we're all looking at each other fighting over scraps, they're running off, like I say, with all the money and the power. And newspaper moguls and things like that. They don't care about all these issues about crime. Philip Green has robbed people's pensions. Do you know what I mean? What? That's one of the worst crimes you can do, robbing people's ability to retire and stuff like that. So yeah, like I say, poverty is the crime. That's the only crime.
As long as everyone's okay with this, I'm going to do one more question, which is really interesting, from Kat Cray from the RMT. Solidarity to the RMT, one of my favourite trade unions, and to Kat as well, who's absolutely outstanding. So she has said, will a cashless society impact the GRT community? And she thinks obviously it will, but she's seen it talked about. She hasn't seen the particular issue talked about enough, and the Tube is pushing to go fully cashless, which her union is fighting.
I think a cashless society really impacts us on the basis that we are one of the most poor and deprived communities in the country. I think it affects everybody who's poor and deprived. And I think it especially affects minorities who are historically, like us, right, who are really, anxious about the government, afraid of the government and what they're going to do to us, especially now. Like, they're asking us to fill in a census whilst they're passing legislation to steal our kids. You know what I mean? Like, so a cashless society obviously means more control for people in the banks and MPs and everything else like that. We don't trust these people as it is, and you want us to go cashless, and it's like, forget any sort of nefarious activity that people are doing cashless. Forget all of that. Let's talk about homeless people. Let's talk about their access to things like bank accounts. Gypsies and travellers find it difficult to actually get bank accounts in the bloody first place. So put that in perspective. Like, if you go cashless, and people already experience discrimination on whether they can get bank accounts or not, you're basically outlawing life. There's no way of getting around these. What are we going to do? Give all homeless people and gypsies and travellers who are nomadic, what are we going to give them? All access to contactless payment? How does that work? Where is it going to go if they don't have bank accounts? If they don't have proper documentation and things like that, what are these people going to do? Well, they're not. They're just going to basically die or turn to criminality, back into the justice system, back into having their kids taken off of them, all of these really terrible outcomes, which don't work. So, yeah, I mean, you're onto something really big there. Cashless society is it's not just about making people follow the rules. It's about tyranny, right? And the government's ability to enforce tyranny upon the people. And a cashless society is really part of that. And this is coming from somebody, right, who works in payments and things like that. So yeah, I know all about, you know, credit cards and bank accounts and all that sort of stuff. But discrimination really exists in these things. Look, if we can barely get served by some shopkeepers and Sainsbury's and Morrison's and places like that, some families can barely get served from these places. What do you think a bank account, a cashier at a bank's going to do to these people? Cashless society is you know, and like not often people talk about sex workers and things like that. When we talk about a cashless society, we are marginalizing people who are already marginalized enough, and we're pushing them to the brink. We're basically squeezing the last bit of juice, you know, that we can get out of these people. And that's the issue. Like, what happens when somebody, you know, is really poor, can't afford to set up a proper business yet, or can't afford an accountant or anything like that, and they're just doing, you know, people don't, cash in hand is technically illegal, right? But what happens when poor people can't actually afford to get a proper bank account, or they've been in prison or things like that, and they're deemed as a risk? Cash in hand labor work and things like that, well, that's their last lifeline.
It's obviously struck a chord, and Kat absolutely agrees with everything you've said there, which is brilliant. Now, I could go on with this all night, apart from the desperate need to run to the toilet, actually. But that happens. That's a regular thing. Perhaps it's my age. But what I'd like to do now is I'd like to come to the closing comments. I'd like everyone to have some closing comments. Before I do that, I would like to say that, Luke, all the people you mentioned, there's an open invite to anyone to come on Socialist Think Tank, because that's what we do. We want to amplify voices, and that's the whole point of what we're doing. So if anyone would like to come on at any point, then just get in touch through our channel, through Twitter, through Twitch, Facebook, anything like that, or through our email. And please do feel free to become a member, which is free. You can choose to contribute or not. We really appreciate contributors, but you get no special privileges for being a contributor, because you know, that is the way we are. We are socialists, and if people can contribute, we appreciate it. If they can't, you're still exactly the same. You're a part of our community, and it's one of the things we really love about being part of Socialist Think Tank. We also would like anytime open invite for you to come on to speak about any issue, because we know that you have opinions on all sorts of different things, not just GRT things. This show was about GRT, but we also respect the idea that everyone has opinions on everything, like healthcare, like, you know, every single aspect. So we want to hear as many voices as we can on those things. I'm going to come to Rochelle, Laura, Luke in that order, because I'm going to kind of dovetail into Rochelle. You're wearing a particularly fetching t-shirt, which matches my little badge here. You know, we yeah. So Rochelle.
So I'd definitely say that, like, for me, especially in the job that I do, and in the interests that I have, and things like that, I definitely don't think that you should have to be a socialist, or you should have to be that way inclined, like, with your thought processes and the things that you believe in, to be able to have these types of conversations with people, like with yourself, Luke. And then, like, for me, I've come here, I knew I would learn something, but I didn't actually know that I could make a difference in take it away and then teach the kids it at school. And you know, that's definitely something that I really, really want to do. I don't know, yeah, I didn't think that it was all very relatable. And I do think that before speaking to you, the only interactions I've ever had is TV programs and watching what's been out, and, you know, maybe these like weird documentaries that they put out and things like that. Like, I've been to Appleby. I went to Appleby once, younger, and I loved it, and it was so good. And I remember watching these things thinking, like, that's not what I remember. Like, what's changed? It's odd. But you've definitely taught me something, and I am going to take it away and do something with it. Yeah. So just thank you. And if there's anybody listening who wants to get in touch and maybe work on something that we could deliver in schools, or like schools, like I'm the queen of the world, all of them, my school. I'm quite happy to work with as many people as I can and make sure that it's right, because I don't want to put out the wrong things. Well, I think that's very important. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Rochelle. And those T-shirts as well that you're modelling so splendidly will be available soon. But it's going to be a members thing, because we kind of got limited resources on them. But it's going to be a members thing. So a few members are quite excited about that at the moment. So become a member. Laura.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly can't add anything to the conversation. I echo what Rochelle said. Just thank you for coming on. It's so interesting that the television programs were mentioned tonight, because, like Rochelle, I didn't know anything about your community other than those programs, and the standout thing for me was the grabbing. And as someone who's like fiercely feminist and like women's rights is like my thing, I was like, oh, you can't do that. And so to know that is completely fabricated, and like, come on, Howie. And I think also what we can take from tonight from talking to you, Luke, is that everybody who is living in poverty and everybody who's working class is being treated this way, whether they know it or not. And it is certainly something we can all come together, like you were saying about communities coming together and having that solidarity. We need to learn that you are not other to us. We are all the same. We're all being treated like shit from them above. So I think that's something we can work on. And also, let's not forget those programs exist for. There was that one about people on the dole benefits scroungers and all of they think this of all of us. And yes, you can get away with anything if you're rich. People don't suffer. If they're rich, they don't go to jail. Also, apparently, you can be completely racist when you're rich and important, because it's not racism though, is it though? It's gaffes if you're a prince. So yeah, rest in peace. I just want to say thank you so much for teaching me everything that I've listened to tonight. Has been wonderful, and I really like Rochelle, really want to be able to do something about it and be an ally and hopefully help in one way or another. And like Paul said, let's get more people on, more voices. Let's amplify this situation and make people realize that you're really nice people. Just trying to live your life. Leave them alone. So thank you.
Thanks, Laura. And Luke, I'll do a very tiny little thing after you, but you are basically closing the show. So take it away.
Well, look, it was a pleasure to come on the show. It's really, really great to talk to you all. Look, I'll finish with what you can do. The bar is set below ground level. Right, it's literally a sewer out there pretty much in terms of how we're treated and everything else. But what I'd say are easy things: go to your local Labour CLP meetings, Green Party, or whatever the hell you're part of. Go to them, make sure that people aren't saying racist stuff, inform them on it, talk about the fact that these people have nowhere else to go. That's why unauthorised encampments exist. Talk about the fact that the reason these things exist is because local authorities have failed them. Talk about the fact that we actually do pay council tax on permanent sites. We do pay ground rent on transit sites. And regardless of whether we pay council tax or not, the poorest in the country don't pay council tax anyway. So point out those flaws in their argument, basically. Point out the fact that the planning system rejects us on average 85% to 90% of the time, but they only reject ordinary people 15% of the time. Shock horror. So they're saying go to the planning system. The planning system's racist. Criminal justice system's really bad. But so if you're in a position, you're a lawyer or something like that, do something about it in that space. Be like an active. Like I talk to many groups like us, and I think what I've learned from other groups black groups and other minority communities and sex workers as well. Be an active bystander. If you see the police abusing people from our community, go and watch them. Make sure they're not engaging in police brutality. It's a very simple thing. You don't have to do anything active. Just film it whilst you're going by or whatever. Obviously, try to be respectful or whatever. Don't film us being ground into the dirt, because that's what they do to us. yeah, but like get involved in, the fact that you work in schools and stuff. Make sure kids feel like welcome at your school. Make sure, people aren't calling them the P word and horrible things. Make sure you're engaging them. Make sure that they're not being put into isolation and things like that. Really terrible things that no child should ever have to experience, frankly. Challenge it at your own dinner table. I'm not asking you to get out there and, scream at everybody. I'm just asking you to just, be a decent person, right? If you have people round for dinner at your house and they say the P word and they talk really nastily like that and feed into all these racial tropes, just challenge them on it. Because the thing is, it's a lot easier for you to do than it is for me to do, to sit there. And I've been in CLP meetings, right, where they've talked about my community rotten. And honestly, I'm a confident individual, and I've sat there and I've been speechless and not been able to get a word out. So all those small things, refuse to hand out racist campaign materials. These are really easy things for you to do. Turn up at planning meetings to make sure people, aren't going, well, we don't want them here. And be like, well, have you met the people that are going to live on this site? Well, no. Okay, well, then shut up then. Simple. You're making assumptions about people before you even met them. It's very stupid. Well, silly, I should say. Silly. Try not to be like, ableist. I am genuinely still learning. Like, I know I'm really trying to keep up on it and like educate myself as well. Because like we said, anti-racism is an active thing. It's a process. And, being accepting of other communities is an active process. Learning about other communities is an active process. None of this is I was born an anti-racist and I'll stay that way. That's not how it works, unfortunately. It's like one of the professors in the United States said. It was like, I think it was in the United States. Anyway, she was saying, like, if you've gone through the education system and all that, and you genuinely think that you're an anti-racist or things like that, you're very rare. You're like lottery winner rare, basically. We've all got our biases to unlearn and be accepting of other people. So, yeah, and like I said, I'm not going to cancel you for anything. Just ask the difficult questions to someone like me rather than attacking a family on the street. You know what I mean? That's what I'd say to people. But honestly, thanks for having me. There's plenty to learn about my community. There's plenty of things that are different about our community, but there's nothing. We're not aliens from a different planet. We're not from a different portal. We're genuinely just people that have aspirations, that want our kids to grow up in the best way possible. We don't want to live with loads of rubbish on our rise encampments and things like that. Our cleanliness is part of who we are, not living around rubbish. We took that from India years ago, and Irish Travellers are the same. It's just that we're not getting access to those local services, and councillors think that they can throw us under the bus, basically. So that's my closing comment. I am a bit of a talker, so thanks for having me. Invite me back whenever you want, and I'll come. It'll be a pleasure. But yeah, thanks, Paul. Thanks, Rochelle, and thanks, Laura.
It's an open invite, and thank you so much, Luke. Thanks for being on, and thanks for educating us, because it is a part of a process. We also need to shout out your socials. What are your social media handles and stuff?
So at GRT Socialists, and also like my personal one is at Luke Smith GRT. That's me. But yeah, I don't really post from my personal one because I'm too busy on the other account putting the world to rights, I guess, and sticking up for everybody else who seems to be, trodden on, I guess. So, but yeah, thanks.
Brilliant, thank you. And I would like to just finally say something we didn't really touch on tonight, but I do think it's very important to mention. One of the things that I think the GRT community gets so much hassle for and so much racism for is the fact that they are not conforming to the way of life that allows the establishment to remain as the establishment. You are living a different lifestyle, whether certainly the nomadic people are living a different lifestyle where you're not fitting into a certain box, and that causes fear. And I think if you look at how people are treated, then that's how they would treat you if they could get away with it, which was what Tony Benn said. I think that's very important. But this weekend has been a historic weekend. DMX has lost his life, which is absolutely tragic. A 99-year-old man has managed to live to 99, so fair play to him. Well done. I don't know how that manages that. I don't know how people manage to do that on a really prime diet and very little work. I'm not really sure how that can possibly occur. But I want to leave you on my favourite quote from Prince Philip. In the event that I am reincarnated, I would like to return as a deadly virus to contribute something to solving overpopulation. Rest in peace, big fella. We'll see you on the other side.